Hello and welcome back to the Dropship Podcast. John with you today for a solo episode. It's just me, no Ben today. And today I'm going to be talking to you a bit more about mindset stuff. So I think Ben and I have been sprinkling this into the show a bit more in recent times, a bit more in recent episodes. And we've been getting a lot of good feedback about this sort of stuff. And so we're going to continue to do that because at the end of the day, as an entrepreneur, particularly as an early entrepreneur, somebody who might just be starting your first business, might be thinking about starting your first business, the biggest hurdle you face in reality is what's going on in your own head. It's not, how do I do this or how do I do that? You know, how can I apply this strategy? How do I open a store? How do I get suppliers? These feel like the biggest challenges to you in the beginning, but they're actually not really. You can find answers to all of those things. The answers are abundant and they are out there and you can find them. What is far harder to do is unlock what's going on within your own mind, because at the end of the day, only you see that. Only you experience that. And while we all experience similar things going on in our mind, at the end of the day, we are all unique individuals to a certain extent as well. And so a few weeks ago, it might have even been a couple of weeks ago, there was some discussion going on within our Dropship Breakthru Slack workspace. So that's a community, a little online community based on chat that people who are within our Dropship Breakthru program and our elite membership have access to. And it's really turned into quite a thriving little community in and of itself, which I absolutely love. There is just so much great conversation and content, questions and answers that goes on in there. I think at this point, it's probably far surpassing, at least from my own expectations of where it was going to get to. And in and of itself, I think it's a massively and wildly valuable thing. I think it's one of the healthiest little communities that I've ever been a part of. And I've been part of a lot as part of courses and things like that over my 10 years in business. I'm very impressed with it. I can think of a few others out there that I've been a part of that are as good, but very, very few. So dropshipbreakthru.com/join if you want to get in there to have it to support your journey. But there was some discussion going on in a couple of threads in there, which related back to the idea of free state, which is, I guess, a mental roadblock that entrepreneurs often find themselves in, where I say free state is the term a lot of people use for it, but it's essentially kind of like feeling stuck or overwhelmed or paralyzed, if you want, and it can come up in a number of different ways, but it's basically feeling like you've got things to do, but for some reason you're just not doing them, right? And I think, and so we commonly refer to this as free state. And so there was some conversation going on and people sharing ideas and thoughts. There were a few people who were at various threads feeling like they were in that state and they were looking for assistance to move past that, to deal with that and continue to take action, continue to grow their businesses. And I provided some answers to those people in their specific circumstances. And I really stuck with me, I think, in the couple of weeks following. And of course, thinking, well, look, there's a lot of people who listen to our podcast who are not within that little community and don't see those sort of answers. And so it would be a great thing to talk about here. So free state is something I think at some point or another, or a sense of overwhelm, if you like, is something that almost all entrepreneurs are going to deal with at some point in their journey. I think it does crop up a lot right at the very beginning when you're looking to make these big life changes. You're making to take what feels like big risks at that time, but it can come up at all points. It comes up for me. I've been an entrepreneur and building businesses and growing businesses for over 10 years now, and it still from time to time comes up for me. And it comes up in various different ways. And I think I try to categorize it into two things. I find it comes up for people, and including, as I mentioned, myself at times, when you're kind of faced with all the things that you could do or need to do, the to-do list, if you like, which as an entrepreneur is almost never ending, always. And it feels overwhelming. And you're like, holy shit, this is just too much. There's just too much here. How am I ever going to do all this? Where do I start? What do I do? And you can see so many opportunities sometimes and so many things you could be doing, but at the same time, it's so much work. And coupled with that, you don't know if a lot of the things are going to work, and it just, all of these thoughts kind of snowball together into that. And this is where I think the sense of overwhelm that we associate with freeze state comes from. It feels overwhelming. And that sense of overwhelm just kind of envelopes you and prevents you from doing anything. And you just kind of sit there, you distract yourself, you procrastinate, you find other things to do which have nothing to do with what you should be doing. And you can just kind of can find yourself ignoring the things that are there for you to do. So that, I think that's one way that freeze state comes up for people. And I think the other main way that it comes up is is when you're faced with a large decision, and it's scary, and you feel fear about that. You have fear of the unknown. You have fear of getting it wrong, fear of failure. And so you become frozen and unable to make that decision, which might be a decision that you need to make to go to the next things in front of you, right? Sometimes there is just this big decision in front of you, and it's kind of like the gateway to other things that you can then go and do. And without making the decision whether that gate opens or remain closed, you can't do anything else. Whether it's in your business or in your life, there are points where you just have that, what feels like that big thing. And for you, that may be making the decision to start a business. If you're listening to this show, you're obviously at some point either planning to or already have started a business. And so that can be the first thing. It could be choosing which products to sell. If you're going down the high ticket dropshipping path, you're going to choose a niche to build your business in. Obviously, that feels like a very big decision when you're doing it for the first time. But further down the track, as you're growing your business, it can come up. There may be a big opportunity that comes your way, but it's going to require a big investment, or the chance that you're going to try it and it's not going to work, and that will feel like it's going to set you back a long way. And so in those circumstances, it's very common to feel frozen by that, to feel paralyzed, because the fear is so heavy that you're associating with that decision, or that it comes along with that decision, that you're just unable to make any call. Not that you're going to say no to it, but you can't say yes, you can't say no, because you don't want to say no, but you're also too fearful to say yes. And so you kind of just sit there spinning your wheels and not going anywhere. And so I think those are the two main ways that freeze state comes up. And I think the way that you can manage and deal with it are a little bit different in both circumstances. I think there's definitely a lot of overlap between the two, but there are a few kind of, I guess, from a tactical perspective, if you like, ways that you can manage and deal with those things. And I say manage and deal with those things because a lot of people, when we talk about these mindset things, like to think, well, what can I do so that I never experience that? And the reality is that you can't never experience that. Fears are normal. And humans cannot avoid feeling fear ever. Yes, we all experience it, experience the different fears and the different mindset issues, if you like, that entrepreneurs experience or people experience. We feel them to different extents, and we feel them at different times. They're triggered by different things. Everybody is a little bit different in that sense. But the reality is it's something we all experience. And in a lot of ways, experiencing fear and freeze state and whatnot is actually a good thing, because every time you feel stuck by a fear, it really just means that you're challenging yourself. And your fear is an opportunity also for you to grow, to become a better person, to change your life, because the fear usually comes up when you're faced with something that has the potential for you to grow. Not always. Right? There are times where you might experience fear where it might lead to death, and you don't want to go down that path, and you shouldn't. And your fear from an evolutionary perspective and an instinctual perspective is actually telling you the right thing, telling you to avoid that thing. But oftentimes fear comes up in circumstances where you have the opportunity to actually do a good thing. And so you don't want to run from fear. What you want to do is learn to recognize when it is a fear that is actually telling you that you need to, whoa, hold up, you're going to die here. Or if it's just that a fear that you need to manage and move past in order to access the growth and the good thing that lies on the other side of that decision or thing that you need to do. And so you're never going to avoid them, but you certainly can learn how to manage your fears, and utilize those fears and manage them, so that you can move past them, and grow along the way. So I'll tackle the first one first, which I mentioned, which was the overwhelm free state. Where you've got a never-ending to-do list, you've got a lot of things, a lot of big things you need to do. It seems like it's never-ending, and you probably just want to get to the point where you're making more money or achieving more of what it is you set out to achieve. So there's a couple of things that I like to do to deal with that. And I think I'll focus on just 3 here. Otherwise, I could probably talk about this for a really long time, but I'll respect your time as well. And let's get to it. The first thing I think that's very important here is to have a plan, to be following a plan. So a lot of people start a business, and I think there are people who listen to this podcast who have gone out just by listening to this podcast and started a business, a high-ticket dropshipping business, which I think is absolutely fantastic. It's pretty wild that that's the case. But you've got a bit of a plan from listening to this podcast. Like, we share a lot here. We give you a lot of the steps and all of that sort of thing. But it's probably not enough in and of itself. I think it's, like I say, I think it's fantastic, but there's more to it. You need a really solid plan. You need a plan for your business. You need to learn how to set goals. You need to learn how to set timelines and timeframes that are realistic and have perspective to them. What a lot of people do a lot of the time when they get into business is they have very unrealistic expectations of what's going to happen and when. And when you couple those with a really big to-do list of all the things that you got to do to grow your business, if you have unrealistic expectations around time and goals and what's actually possible, then the likelihood that you're going to feel overwhelmed is very high and fall into that free state. If you think it's all going to come together in the next month, but when you look at your to-do list, you're like, but I can't do that in the next month, you're likely not to feel very good about that, right? And so having a solid plan, not just for the next month, I mean for the next year, a little less detail for the next 2 years, for 5 years, that steps out your business growing over that period of time. And this is the reality. I know a lot of people get into dropshipping and want to talk about dropshipping and hear about dropshipping because they want a fast result, a fast outcome, a fast business. But that's not the experience, and that's not what you should expect. If you get into this business, you should do so with the expectation that it's going to be for the long term. Like, this is going to work, and it's going to work over time. And when you have that expectation, and then you look at your to-do list, and you can say, right, next month I'm going to do these things. The month after I'm going to do these things. The month after I'm going to do these things. In 6 months' time, I'm going to start doing that thing. In a year's time, I'm going to start doing that thing. Right? And realize that it doesn't all have to come together tomorrow. And you attach goals and little markers and outcomes to each of those things so that you can measure your progress. It's less overwhelming because you have a plan, you have a timeline. It's all stepped out for you, and you can see you then have something to measure yourself again. Because one of the ways that you can get around the overwhelm is to break the big thing into smaller, manageable steps. So the overall project of growing a business to X amount of dollars or X amount of profit or whatever, or a size where you can quit your job, that in and of itself is a big, big thing. It feels like a huge project. But when you break it down into all of its little chunks, and then you allocate those chunks to time frames with measurable markers that you've done those things, like what does that look like? Over time, then as you move through those smaller chunks, you can actually see and feel your progress. And so when you can see that you're making forward progress towards your goals, towards that big, overwhelming thing, it becomes it feels less overwhelming. And you can see that all I need to do tomorrow or the next week or the next month is that and that. I don't need to do the 57 things that are on my total list, because I can see when I'm going to do those. I'm not going to get to some of those for 2 months, for 3 months, for 6 months. I just need to focus on what I need to do this month. And that's only really 2 or 3 things, right? And then I'll get to the other things later. And so when you have a longer term plan for your business that takes the big goals and breaks them down into small, manageable steps, then it's much less likely that you're going to feel overwhelmed. And once again, break your goals down into really smaller parts of those goals. So if you're like saying, well, I've got to build a business that's making, $300,000 a month in sales and $50,000 a month in profit, that's what I got to do, but you're at zero. That feels like a really massive thing, right? Now you can do that, but break it down. Okay, that's where you want to get to. Next month, just make $10,000 in sales and make $1,000 in profit. Then the next month, make $15,000 in sales and $5,000 in profit. And so have this stepped out, smaller goals. You could even go smaller goals than that. Let's just sell one product, right? In fact, when you're just starting out, find a niche. Don't worry about the revenue. Find a niche. Okay, what's your next goal? Well, my next goal is to build a website. What's your next goal? Your next goal is to call one supplier, just one supplier. That's all you got to do. I mean, if the supply thing, one of the stories from our membership about talking about this free state was from a fella who, he'd been a bit in and out of his business. He was just setting it up. He called some suppliers and got some approvals the first time, and then kind of for whatever reason had drifted out of it a little bit. And he was coming back to it, and he had a list of suppliers to call. And even though he'd done it before and been successful, he was feeling a bit frozen by having to go back and call these suppliers again. And I completely get this. I used to hate calling suppliers when I first started. I used to feel, very insecure about doing that and have a lot of fear around that. I still did it, but, it wasn't something that I looked forward to, and I would often feel frozen when faced with doing it. And so my advice to him was, look, yeah, I can't remember the number, but let's say you've got 20 suppliers on your list, 30 suppliers on your list, and you think about making all of those phone calls and having all of those conversations. It feels quite daunting because, you might get 30 no's, right? Of course, you're not really going to get 30 no's if you actually went and called all of those suppliers, but you might. And it's just a lot of calls. It's a lot of conversation. It's a lot of follow-up. And so it feels daunting. And I kind of said, look, why don't we just say, forget the 30. Just pick one. Call one supplier this week. And if you call that one supplier this week, you've won. It's a good week. You did good. And then let's take next week when you get to it, or the next day when you get to it. And guess what the target will be? Call another supplier. And then instead of waiting another week, just call another one the next day. And then maybe the next day after that, if everything's going well, make the decision to call 2, just 2. Forget about the rest of the list. So break things down as small as you can, right? All you have to do tomorrow is call one supplier. Then increase the goal a little bit. Then increase it a little bit more. Once you've called all your suppliers, then your next goal is to turn your website live, make one sale. Don't think about making $500,000 in sales. All you have to do is make one sale. In my first month in business, I made 2 sales. What would be my target for the next month? Make 4 sales. Don't get obsessed or sucked into the lies you hear online about, my business went from 0 to blah, 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 some ridiculous number in 3 months. For starters, the majority of those are bullshit. They're literally made up. I see ads every day from businesses in the dropshipping space that are factually lies. Like they're fake. They're just totally fake. They've got fake people in them, and they're from fake companies with fake results. It really fucking sucks. It kills me as somebody who's in the space that's not fake. And there are some people in the space who are not fake as well. I'm not saying everyone's fake, but there's a lot out there that is. Like, don't get obsessed with that. You don't need to make $50 million next month. You literally don't need to. And even if you did, you wouldn't know how to manage it. Let me be honest. So you're just trying to grow, set little goals. You don't need to go from 1 to 1 million. You need to go from 0 to 1. Then you need to go from 1 to 2. Then maybe you can go from 2 to 4. Then from there, maybe you can go from 4 to 6. And then from 6 to 8. And so on and such forth. As long as you're better each day, you do a little bit more. Each day, each month, you're a little bit better than the month before. And don't tie it just to revenue. That's like sometimes the worst thing to measure against. There are so many other measures of success and progress in a business that are not dollar figures, right? Doubling the amount of product offers you have, that's a win. Calling extra suppliers, that's a win. Bringing on an employee to help you, that's a win. Like improving the SEO on your website, even though you don't have the results yet, it's still a win. So you have to look at your efforts and your business in totality and say, am I in a better place than I was last month? That's what you're really trying to do. And so that's how I kind of like to approach the overwhelm. Have a plan, have a plan, have goals, tie them to realistic timeframes, and make each step as small as possible. And that'll help you to move through that sense of overwhelm. Now, if we're talking about the freeze state associated with big decisions, big scary decisions, I think, firstly, it's important to recognize that, I alluded to this before, but this is a very normal thing to experience this, right? So I do see people, and I've seen it once again in comments in our community, people who are feeling stuck, thinking that there's something wrong with themselves, thinking that what's going on in their mind and their fears are unusual or outside of the normal experience, and they beat themselves up about it. Like you can literally almost hear the self-talk that people have where they're like flogging themselves internally because they think there's something wrong with them because they seem unable to make decisions or take steps that they've seen a few other people take before, and thinking that nobody else is experiencing what they experience. And so the first thing I want to say, particularly if you're in that state right now about something, that's completely normal, man. This is a normal part of the human experience. Almost everybody feels this. Very few people ever talk about it, right? We all feel it. Once again, we all feel it at different times and to different extents, yes. But I feel paralyzed by fear of failure, paralyzed by fear of the unknown at times. But yes, over time and with practice, I've been able to recognize those feelings and find ways to move past them in a shorter amount of time than I probably did at the start of my experience. So don't beat yourself up. It's normal. But what you need to do is find ways to move past it. And I honestly think the best way to deal with this, aside from saying things like I think practice is a big part of it. So practicing, the more you put yourself in the situations where you experience that and are able to move past it and take that next step and realize that you need to take action despite fear. Like fear is a normal part of the experience, like I say. And the more you move past it, I think it does get easier to move past it when it comes up for you. Now that might not necessarily help you if you're feeling it for the first time or you're kind of recognizing it for the first time in your life, in your adult life. But, just know that if you can do it once, oftentimes the next time it comes up, it's going to be a little bit easier and then a little bit easier and then a little bit easier. But I think the best way is to find support. And like, it's really hard to move past these things when you're just sitting there by yourself in your own head. It is really hard. And I always try, when we talk about the mindset stuff, to think up ways that people can just manage this completely internally to themselves. And the more I think about it, and the more I think about and see people kind of make these shifts and move past these things, I see people doing it in the best way possible, if you like, from a outcome and a time-based perspective, when they're not doing it themselves. So what I mean is, when I say find support, this can come in many different forms. Have a mentor. I mean, this is a massive one. If you've been around listening to people talk about business and things like that online, anywhere, you will have heard many successful people talking about the need to find a mentor, or mentors, as it were. It doesn't have to be just one person. And finding a mentor can mean multiple different things as well. You might have a mentor that you know in your life, have come across in some way. You might pay to have a mentor, which is completely legitimate. The fact that you're paying somebody doesn't make them any less of a mentor. It might be somebody. It could be as simple as somebody who you follow online. It could be, you can find those people in multiple different places. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who's doing the exact thing that you want to do, right? In this sense, where we're talking about things like fear, with the size of decisions, or fear, or the unknown, or failure, anybody who's experienced in business is going to be able to help you with that. Because, like I say, while the specific subject of your fear may be different, the experience of feeling fear and feeling frozen when it comes to doing big things, or doing things that are challenging to you, anybody who's been in business has experienced that. And so finding somebody who's got the experience to mentor you through that, they might be somebody who does high ticket dropshipping, if that's what you're looking to do, but it could just be somebody who's following a different business model, but has been doing it for some time and is successful. So I think you want to find a mentor. You want to find community. Once again, you look at, like in our Slack workspace, where people communicate with each other, not just with me and Ben, but like with each other. I mean, I'm not in most of the conversations. I look at a lot of them, but people are supporting each other. They're sharing ideas. There's even just having somewhere where you can actually talk about your fears and get them out into the open with other people in a space you feel comfortable, can make all the difference. And the support that you can find just from other people who you know are at or around your level with the thing that you're looking to do, and you know they're probably experiencing the same thing, and they'll probably tell you that as well, and then provide some insights or some ways that they've dealt with that situation. I mean, this is immensely helpful if you find yourself in that sort of place. Sometimes just being somewhere where you can say, hey, I'm struggling with this, and getting it out of your head enables you to deal with it, enables you to move past it, to take the action that you're feeling held back from taking. Whereas I think when you sit there by yourself, and the entrepreneurial journey is often a lonely one, when you sit there by yourself in your own mind without getting things out there, and I know this from experience because I'm absolutely fucking terrible at talking to other people about my fears and what I'm experiencing. But I know that when I do, it's like so liberating. And you can literally feel your mindset and your attitude changing when you do that. And then actually having a conversation with somebody, like, it's so massive. And this is why, like, Ben and I are trying to build a community here in our course, but also it's why we do live events, try to get people together live. We've got one coming up in July in Salt Lake City, which, if you're listening to this podcast, you're absolutely welcome to come to dropshipbreakthru.com/live. There are still tickets available. Sales are closing around the 30th of June, but this episode will be out before then. So if you want to come along, and hang out with other high ticket dropshippers face to face and talk about their journey, share your journey, hear from people who are way ahead of you as well as people who are at the same stage of you. And we have people there who are right at the beginning, right through to having made more than 8 figures in revenue. Come along, but you don't have to come along to that one. Just put yourself in places with people who are doing the sort of things that you're trying to do, that you want to do, and you're going to find that the things you're fearful of, the things that you're frozen about, they kind of melt away a little bit when you're able to talk about them and listen to other people talking positively about what they're doing. So finding a mentor, finding a community are probably the biggest ways. And look, I know that can feel challenging. If you're somebody who's maybe feels you're a bit introverted, you don't do well in social situations. Look, oftentimes, those can be people who are really keen on business as well. I mean, like, honestly, it's myself I'm one of those people. I don't like socializing with other people. I'm not really an outgoing person, which might sound strange given I'm always online and on video and on this podcast talking constantly and in a lot of places. But like, I don't do social stuff. And, I know sometimes Ben's the same, but, I think that in and of itself can be a fear that you might feel frozen or stuck around. But if you can do it in some way that feels comfortable for you, it's going to really help you. And the reason why a mentor is going to help you as well, which I think is really important, is that it's easier to move past the freeze state or the paralyzed feeling when you can inject a sense of perspective into the decision. And like what it actually means and what are the pros, what are the cons, and what's the long-term thing here. And somebody who's been there and done that can give you a sense of perspective that, particularly if you're a bit earlier on in the journey, you can't have, because you haven't done it yet. And you don't know what could or couldn't happen. You're kind of guessing, you're hypothesizing around, if I do this and I get it wrong, this is what's going to happen. You know what? Usually what you think is going to happen is wrong. It's not actually what's going to happen. And having somebody who's been there and done it, they can tell you, what that's going to look like for you. And so, I can't speak to this highly enough. As well as that, if you going back to the first thing we talked about having a plan, having something written down, having goals that are realistic, that are specific, that are broken down into smaller chunks so that you can move through things more easily and get a sense of forward momentum and progress and accomplishment, which are all ways to help yourself deal with fear and build a positive mindset, is that you will get that from a mentor as well, or a mentor can help you with that. In this case, particularly if they are familiar and have experience in the business model that you're pursuing, right? They can give you or help you develop the plan. They can certainly tell you what are the realistic timeframes that you should expect to be able to complete X, Y, and Z, and tell you that if you have unrealistic expectations that are causing you to feel frozen because you're not actually making progress in the time that you think you should be, when in fact you shouldn't be making progress in that time frame. Somebody who's been there and done that, a mentor or mentors, can really help you to get that in place. And so once again, for what we do, Dropship Breakthru, our program, gives you the plan. It is the plan of all the things that you're going to do, when you're going to do them, the order you're going to do them in, like how long it's going to take you to do them, and we can give you that plan. So, but wherever else you get it. So these are the things, and probably the last thing I'll mention in both cases, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, is that you need to look after yourself. So however you want to term it, health, self-care, whatever it might be, what goes on in your mind is very heavily linked to how your physical body performs. and how you look after your physical self, right? So by that, I mean, if you are not sleeping well, then your mindset is going to suffer from that. And it's not that there's anything wrong with you. It's just that, if you don't get enough sleep, the chemicals washing around inside your skull are not going to be supporting a healthy mindset. If you're eating like crap, your gut is not going to be producing enough of the neurotransmitters to support you being in a positive mindset. And so, there's obviously, I find talking about the self-care and the health thing difficult because it's something that people get really unnecessarily religious and tribal about, which I find so ridiculous, given the importance. And, there's a lot of dubious shit that gets pumped online, and I would hate to put myself in that same area. But the reality is, if you're not getting adequate fuel for your body, adequate quality fuel for your body, if you're not practicing regular movement, if you're not getting enough sleep, or you're not getting enough quality sleep, and if you haven't found ways to manage stress in your life, and there are many different ways to do that, and I would never say that there is one that's better than another. I think there are different ways to manage stress that suit different people. There's no right or wrong there. Aside from things like using drugs or drinking alcohol, those are definitely not ways to manage stress. I don't care what anybody says. But if you're not doing one of those, if you're not doing what you can to improve yourself in those three areas, and I know for most people, you might be great at the movement side of things, or you might be great at the what you eat side of things, but you're not great at the sleep. I think a lot of us are maybe great at one or two of those things, but not at all three. There is always improvements to make here. And so the more that you can do there, and for some people, the improvements are, larger than others for sure. But the more you can do there, the less likely it is. And 100% I can tell you this from personal experience. I would say when I'm on point with what I'm consuming, what I'm putting into my body, movement, and quality sleep, like my mindset, how I think, what I think about, how quickly I think, is at least 100 times better. Like I can't even, 100% better. Like, I shouldn't say 100 times, but by a large factor is it improved. I notice this regularly. And over the course of 10 years, having put more and more emphasis onto these things, and I'm not going to tell you how you should or shouldn't do it, because at this point, I don't know that I'm quite ready to get into that sort of space. Other than to say that you need to do it at this point. Don't underestimate that. If you're somebody who is feeling, a lot of resistance in your mind, a lot of fear to the things that are in front of you that you could do or should do when it comes to business, and you're not sure why, well, I would be looking at some of that. What state is your physical body in? We don't just want to focus on what state is the mental side of things and is your mind. When we're talking about mindset, we're talking about your thoughts, your mind, that intangible stuff. But your ability to do that comes from the state that you're in physically. So don't overlook that. Don't sleep on that, as it were, because there are, for a lot of people, there are significant mindset gains to be had simply, and I shouldn't say simply because it's not necessarily simple, but simply from improving your physical state without doing any work on the mental side of things. Simply improving your physical state can just lead to mindset improvements in and of itself. And sometimes for some people, that might be the trigger that you need. So have a think about that. And look, I hope this has been helpful for somebody out there who feels stuck, just to take that tiny next step. And that's all you need to do. If you're feeling stuck for any reason, just do one tiny thing that puts you ahead today compared to where you were yesterday. It was a good day. You've done well.
Thanks for listening to the Dropship Podcast. You can find all the show notes for this episode at dropshippodcast.com. And if you're ready to take the next step in your dropshipping journey, we invite you to join us inside Dropship Breakthru, where John and I will walk you through step by step in starting your own high-ticket dropshipping e-commerce business. But that's not all. Dropship Breakthru will also teach you everything you'll need to know to grow your business and take it to the next level. So head over to dropshipbreakthru.com and sign up for our free training that will help you take the first steps towards building and growing your own profitable high-ticket dropshipping business.